Connecting now.
Being live streamed. And we're on.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to After Office Hours. I'm Melissa D, and this is a chance for us to, again, you know the drill if you've been following the show for a while, where we get to kind of wind down from the day, and I have friends and colleagues and other teachers and instructors and other powerful people out in the world of sex education, intimacy, connection. And tonight's guest, actually, we haven't spoken and really been in touch in a while, but yeah, I love her work. She's been featured on CNN and Fox and Bill Maher's is it Maher's?
But whatever.
Bill Maher's. Why is it? It just looks so different. Yeah. So she's been on CNN, Fox, Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect. She's also been featured on New York Times, and she's also written her first book, Sex Secrets of Escorts, and that was in 2005. So you have a beautiful background, and that's what we'll kind of drop into of, you know, internal family systems, relationship codes. You have a deep study and certification in sexology, anger specialist, trained in rape and domestic violence. And you've also created this platform, the Shame Free Zone. And so I want to welcome Veronica Monet. Thanks for joining me tonight.
I'm really excited to be here on your show. And it's also just really nice to see you again and connect.
Oh, it's really good to see you too. Yeah, we've kind of weaved through each other a little bit, because as the sex positive community of like Seattle and Northern California is actually like pretty tight and pretty woven in. And I took over BodyJoy Intimacy School 3 years ago from Dr. Charlotte Hathaway. And actually she just did an interview with Sheba, and then we hopped on this. And I remember in the email, in our preliminary email, you mentioning that you didn't know that those two things were connected. And so
I didn't. Charlotte and I go back quite a ways. It was the first time we met was at a cuddle party that was being facilitated by Betty Martin.
Oh, where was this?
This was like in Arizona, I think.
Uh-huh.
I think it was in Arizona. I think this is this would have been the early aughts. They founded something called the Association for Sexual Energy Professionals.
Oh.
So we all flew down to Arizona for the very first in-person meeting. And obviously, besides speakers and, you know, vendors and all that, you know, kind of schmoozing, we had classes, and one of them was a class on consent. Of course, Betty Martin was teaching that. Mm-hmm. And it was really, she facilitated a cuddle party where we really got to work with boundaries and clear communication. And that was actually when I really fell in love with Betty Martin's work. And Charlotte and I interacted around the boundary assertions, and it was fun, and also a little edgy, and that was how we met each other, and we just, you know, knew each other after that as colleagues, and we would touch bases every so often. I haven't touched bases with her in quite some time, actually. Well, it's not entirely true. I think we emailed around a little film series that she was doing last year.
Yeah, the Sex of Tale, the Tales of Sex Magic. Yeah.
Exactly. She's such a vivacious, alive, and humorous person.
Right.
And you can find me. I've blurbed several of her books, so I have them sitting on my bookshelf. They're gorgeous books with fully.
Aren't they lovely?
Full color illustrations. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, I mean, there's a lot of places that we could go tonight. And so, yeah, I was curious on, you know, what was the connection there with BodyJoy and Charlotte, if you had any fun stories that you wanted to share there. And then the next.
Yeah. None,
Yeah.
none that I'm going to share.
Private. We'll ask Charlotte.
I have funner stories about Betty Martin, but I'm not sharing those either.
Oh, I'm sure you do. You know, I took her like a pro class probably 3 or 4 years ago, and
yeah,
you know, it's still so edgy and unique and powerful. And anyone that's working with people, for that matter, whether it includes touch or not, I think, you know, even if you're just in a family or dating or in a relationship, any kind of configuration, learning the art of consent and boundaries is really important.
Yeah, it is. And so, you know, my background is in the sex industry, and then, and I retired from escorting in 2004, wrote my book in 2005, became a certified sexologist in 2007. And I just recently launched a brand new offering called Safe and Sensual. And it is coming out of 16 years of being a relationship coach and learning that women in long-term relationships, whether they're married or dating, oftentimes have a real difficult time expressing their desires and also their boundaries.
Yeah.
So I'm really on a mission to help women never tolerate or endure unwanted touch. And I think that just simply saying, you know, oh, well, you get to say no to that, tell him what you want, it's not really adequate, because women really value their relationship. And if you don't give them a tool that is built to create connection and intimacy, then it's not going to get used. So the irony is that when I was working as an escort for 14 years, I learned some incredible ways to have exquisite boundaries around touch while continuing to foster a sexual connection and a heart-centered connection. So I'm really wanting to share that with women, and I do that in my private coaching practice, but I just taught a webinar on that last Saturday.
Beautiful.
It was well attended and well received, and so I'm going to be developing an online training for that as well.
That's great. Yeah, it's so common, at least even just in my field, but even in community, of just because we're partnered or we have established relationships, that, you know, speaking up for your boundaries and even have a conversation around it, people are like, wait, isn't that for strangers, or is that in situations that are dangerous? But I can't tell you how many couples that I've worked with that come in and I can tell they're just agitating each other back and forth because someone's trying to get their needs met a certain way. The other person doesn't feel safe enough to, you know, participate. It's also something that they don't really want. So how do you break that all down and start to tease it apart so that people can really identify what the actual issue is, instead of just living with this big elephant in the room and just going about their day going, okay, what's next on our list? Let's buy the house and have the children. Meanwhile, our sex life and our relationship's a complete, you know, silent disaster.
Yes, exactly. And you know, there's some gender training that comes into play here, obviously. And I have clients of all genders. The webinar that I taught last week was just for women identified people. So, you know, we had trans women in there, but it was a couple of cisgender men showed up, and I actually had to tell them this is actually a space for women identified people. But it brought up an issue for me about how I think people of all genders, if they're in a relationship, a loving relationship, probably can relate to the idea of sometimes saying yes when what they're feeling is no. Or just not even saying yes because nobody bothered to ask. There's just like kind of an assumption we've made love, you know, 100 times over the last 10 years. So of course we're going to do it this way. And if somebody starts to get aware of the fact that actually this isn't working for me, there's this whole array of emotions that come up, like, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? That could be one thing that comes up. Or what do you mean you don't like it? I thought you did like it. You always seem to like it. It's a different conversation than the kind of consent issues that come up when you're dating or you're just meeting somebody. They're very different, but they're maybe even more problematic and more painful.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to feel safe and seen. And so I really think that long-term relationships could be on a trajectory where sex becomes better with each passing year, where the orgasms are deeper and more profound, where the connection is more amazing. But because we don't have really, we're not told how to have these conversations. What we're told, and Betty Martin is so great at surfacing this for us. We're definitely told, hug Aunt so-and-so and kiss Uncle so-and-so. And,
or attend this party because you're obligated to, or.
Yeah, but especially just giving up personal space.
Yeah.
Where, and as children, we definitely don't have a lot of permission to say that I don't like that touch from a caregiver, right? And I can totally see where sometimes it's going to be, well, I have to clean you, or you have to go to the doctor, and maybe you're not going to like the exam. So, but after a while, we kind of get trained in this direction of just not having a voice and not even knowing what works and what doesn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great loss,
Yeah.
So
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I imagine you see this in your studio or your office as well, where people assume that, the relationship goes for, 15, 20, 50 years, and there's supposed to just be this decline. And you just you say, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. And granted, depending on people's health, some things happen sexually around their health. And of course, I have some of my own beliefs about that. I think there's things we can do to take care of our bodies that will extend how vibrant they are sexually and in other ways. But all of that aside, there's ways in which people overemphasize what their body is doing to their sexual response and not paying enough attention to what their heart and their mind is doing. Mm-hmm. So let's say.
You want to give like an example?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Arguing. Okay, so don't know how to argue in a way that feels safe. There's never any closure. So it's like these issues are kind of ruminating under the surface, but maybe you tell yourself it's just not worth another fight, so let's not talk about it, let's ignore it, maybe it'll go away, or it's not a big deal. But unfortunately, your body thinks it is a big deal, and it's still kind of stuck in there.
Yeah.
So I prefer to help my couples that I coach actually go through those conversations, learn how to have them in a way that's successful. But let's say you're looking for a shortcut, or maybe you have a partner who does not even want to address the issues, and so you can't enroll them in that. I've taught live sex classes where I've brought couples in, and we've unpacked some of the conflict for an hour and a half, and then they've had sex for an hour and a half. And I know it's possible to even kind of role play the frustration and the anger so that it frees up your chakras and your energy. And then you can access your sexuality more fully. Mm-hmm. So I remember taking one woman through an exercise in a no. And her partner was performing cunnilingus, and she was just like numb to the whole thing. And she hadn't been able to female ejaculate for 6 months, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. But I saw what was happening in the first hour and a half of the workshop, which is that every time she expressed a fear or a complaint, he invalidated it.
Oh,
so then she would become silent. She would just shut down. So what I did was I told him, well, you keep keep performing the cunnilingus, but don't look at her and don't talk to her.
Just get busy, buddy.
Get busy, buddy. And I was up there talking to her and telling her what a beautiful child.
Hold on a second. So you've got a room full of people that are all being intimate in some way with their partners, right? Okay, let's just paint the picture here.
Yes. So I never went in excess of, say, 3 or 4 couples, because it's a lot to manage as a coach, going from couple to couple for an hour and a half.
Absolutely.
So these were small classes. So usually 6 people, three couples, and it's BYOD, bring your own D.
So, it could be a bio or otherwise.
Yeah. So it wasn't a hookup. You don't come to this and then select somebody from the workshop to hook up with. You come with your partner. Okay. And part of that was I didn't want to, hook up, charge people to get hooked up, because
right. That's a different event.
That's a different event, not particularly legal. But the other thing was I wanted the long-term dynamic. I wanted them to have issues with each other so that I could show them how they could work through those and get to the good sex. In her case, I just came over to her while he was performing cunnilingus, and I encouraged her to scream her no. And she did.
Did he have to like move away, or was it just get it out?
Just get it out. Just get it out. And I should have warned the other participants that this woman it wasn't a consent violation. Right. This was her emoting. So she screamed a very powerful no. And of course she ejaculated.
That's
yeah. So I mean, if you don't, seriously, it's so important to actually deal with the communication and the problem solving and the anger management and all that stuff. It's very, very important. But if you're looking for a shortcut, emoting in a role play can sometimes get you there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes do exercises with clients. I had one recent who I said, okay, let's try this idea. I got an idea. You can feel in your body if this feels right to try out, because I never want to push someone to try something if it doesn't feel like that's the gateway to break through. Okay. And I said, how about, and this is based on her history of going along with unwanted touch and not having a choice and not saying anything. Her whole throat chakra was blocked up. And I said, I'm going to, come in. You can tell me when. Okay. So you have choice then. So I'm going to come in to your body, and she's fully dressed. She's sitting up, and you just rip my hands away or push me away. And then you let me know when you're ready for me to come back again with it.
Oh.
And we did several rounds of this, and man, her nose and her screams got louder and louder, and her feet got involved. And it was so beautiful. It's for her to use me as the person, because I'm the safe person, and I'm going to listen to her. And she's going to feel Peter Levine talks extensively about this. Our bodies need to go through some sort of movement or motion or emote.
Right.
In order to dissolve some of this locked up energy, or these traumatic experiences, or these even these little microaggressions, we need the energy to move. And so it was just so freaking awesome.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It's about the dog shaking it off. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we humans, we get too cerebral. We're way up here in our prefrontal cortex trying to reason everything out and be so
talk therapy. Talk therapy it definitely has some benefit, and we can really get a lot off our chest, but what's the movement and what's the thing behind it?
CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for me is I think it's got minimal benefits. I'm much more into something like internal family systems, where you're actually working with your different parts. And then there's EMDR, which is bilateral stimulation, which is great for trauma.
And that's when people use the stick and kind of go back and forth. Yeah, I did that too.
eye movement desensitization.
Yeah, I had some really great results with that. And I think that people can kind of explore some somatic techniques and then see what's sticking, what feels true for them.
Totally. And another thing I'm fond of is sexological body work. Now, I've only had one session of that, and I did benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, come on in. You didn't know that I was certified for that, did you?
Huh? No, sweetheart, I didn't know that. Do you know Joseph Kramer?
I didn't. I mean, his teachings are actually in, but and he dropped in on some calls, but I haven't studied one-on-one with him. He's super brilliant. He's
very shy. I tried to talk him into having his own radio show, and he said, "No, I'm shy." Yeah, that was about 10 years ago. But and I hope that's not some gossip that he's going to be pissed off at me for sharing. I know he won't mind me sharing this. Charlie Glickman was doing these sex educator salons in San Francisco. They used to be at the Good Vibrations.
I love Charlie Glickman.
He's great. We've interviewed each other on each other's shows. Charlie was having these salons. And so us sex educators would meet there once a month. And Joseph Kramer was in that think tank as well. So was I. And one day, Joseph Kramer announced that he was going to found a school that would teach people how to touch lingams and yonis therapeutically. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was still escorting, and I was getting a lot of attention from some of the wrong places. I think.
You mean in your business, or just publicly, or
legally?
Oh, gotcha.
If you're going to go on Geraldo or
which you did, right?
Fox News and all these things, talk about sex worker rights, you're going to get some attention if you're admitting that you're still working. So I looked at him. I said, Joseph, you're going to go to jail.
Right?
And he didn't.
He hasn't. Yeah, I mean,
no, and sexological body work has turned out to be such an amazing gift for the whole planet, because there's people certified in it in I don't know if it's every country, but around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it really is addressing trauma in the sexual tissues. And I think that's a fabulous concept if you've had consent violations or you've been sexually assaulted. But I have a suspicion that we hold some of our emotional trauma in our sexual tissues that aren't sex related.
Yeah.
And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it differs person to person and where they hold energy in general in their body. But some patterns that I see in myself and my friends and clients are the throat, and usually that's connected to not being able to speak, and sometimes even injury. I had a client that had been grabbed by the neck and the throat a lot as a child, and so there was tension there. The solar plexus, the whole pelvic bowl, regardless of your gender.
Yes.
I mean, the term, and Charlie Glickman writes extensively on this, is like, don't be a tight ass. It's like everything is like tight. It's full of like tension. I love Charlie. The first time I ever took a class on anal for men or people with penises, like prostate play, I took his class in San Francisco, and I was just like, this is so cool to go to this kind of, explicit class where someone is doing a demo in front of the whole class. I was impressed.
He's come a long way from the seminary.
Yeah, right? We love Charlie. And I mean, I'm, to get back to, well, in just a minute, go back to like where I think things are stored in the body, but having explicit sex education tools, regardless if you're partnered or not, things that people can actually see and do in a non-sexualized place.
Yes.
To where it's like, we're not watching porn, although that can be really fun and juicy, right? But we can actually go just in kind of a neutral place and say, this is how you set it up, and this is what you'll need, and these are things to remember. Just ask questions and get the safety and the protocols in line. Like, that's so important.
And you know, you were talking about being a tight ass or having tension in the hips. And one of the things that I discovered about myself a couple of years ago was that I had tension in my hip joints from being in the hospital when I was between the ages of 1 and 2. So we can actually have trauma in the sexual tissues that's not related to sexual perpetrations. And in my case, I had a kidney infection, but the doctors couldn't find it. And they were desperate because I was at death's door. I was fading fast.
What do you mean they couldn't find the infection in the kidneys?
Well, so I was born with bifurcated kidneys, which means I have 4. Wow. So when they would go up the urethra to look at the kidneys, they couldn't see anything.
Oh my gosh. They didn't do an x-ray and go, wow, there's like 4 in there.
Well, eventually they find out, but I don't think it showed up on the x-rays. I don't know why it took so long for them to figure out, but I can tell you I was on massive quantities of antibiotics for about 6 months of my life, and I was in and out of the hospital for a full year. Wow. But I read the medical reports because I was really curious. I knew there was some trauma in there, but I couldn't unpack it. And what I read was that they were actually vaginally penetrating me in their desperation to find out what was wrong with me. Wow. And they documented how careful they were to preserve my hymen, which is so patriarchal.
Totally. I mean, it's respectful that they're, for you, someone that has it, not everyone does, but to like leave it the way it is, however it is. But yeah, I get it.
It's respectful, but how much respect was accrued to this little 1-year-old baby? Do you think that maybe I was strapped down, restrained? Right. How else are you going to do all of this threading things through my urethra and going up into my vagina? Yeah. So there's where the trauma lies.
Yeah.
And discovering that helped even kind of just rebrand this term trauma for me. We don't always have to find a guilty party or a bad thing. Sometimes trauma results from things that actually save our life. Yeah. And I wasn't old enough to tell you what actually happened while I was there. I'm just going, given my age, I doubt very much they were particularly sensitive to the emotional trauma.
Yeah.
But it was still in the tissues. It's still in the tissues that I was 1 year old and strapped to a table and getting penetrated. So it doesn't matter that it saved my life. It doesn't matter that these guys, we could even look at them as good guys, heroes, saving this little child from death, right? The trauma is still in there and it needs to come out. And that's, I think, such an important thing, particularly in the context of relationships. Let me bring that home. If you don't want to character assassinate your partner and you're trying to protect them because they meant well, they didn't have any bad intentions, but something that they did traumatized you, you can claim that trauma without making it a case against them. And it's so important to be able to connect with, I'm traumatized. And to claim that and to find the right healing modality for that. And I, particularly when I'm thinking about sexual trauma in the context of a long-term relationship, it happens. It really does.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep this story very vague, but there is a case study where, there was a couple and they were together they were only with each other. So they were together when, I think they started at like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And over the course of their life together, each time she would get penetrated, it would be really painful, but she just kind of went along with it because it wasn't, she was being like a subservient wife or anything, but she was just like, okay, well, this is what it means to be intimate with my partner. I want to be a good wife. And it's just what it was. And he didn't realize that that's what was going on until later. And so there was a lot of repair that had to be done for her, but also him realizing that, holy wow, like I've been causing you harm and trauma for years. And now I'm afraid of letting my fullness out as a man and as a masculine, as someone that wants to take in a loving way, things like that. And so it was, but together they got to work together, and then independently using sexological bodywork and somatic sex education and all the things, you know, just finding out what really worked. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we're not trying to blame somebody and find the guilty party, it's going to be a lot easier to be honest about, yeah, actually, now every time you say those words, or every time I smell that, or every time you touch me in that particular way, or maybe that particular outfit, I've got it associated now with something negative. To just be able to unpack those, track those, claim those, and then work with them together. You know, for me, I work around consent issues in my long-term relationship. I've been with my current partner now for 11 years. I don't take it for granted. You know, I like to check in and go, hey, is this touch still working for you?
Has there been a situation where something has changed? Is there anything you feel comfortable about sharing?
I think some of the, I can get pretty handsy while we're cooking in the kitchen.
I do that too. Yeah.
I had to look at that. I had to look at that because I had some silly assumptions that because he's cisgender male, that somehow or another it wouldn't matter. And I was like, oh, it does? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Oops. How can I be more sensitive about this? How can I look at what I'm doing and be more considerate? How can I feel into, is this a good touch or is that a good touch? And context too. How do you might feel good about the touch in this room, but not in that room. Or you might feel good about the touch if we're making love or getting ready to make love, but you don't feel good about it while we're talking about a particular issue. Mm-hmm. And then I think you even get a chance, for myself anyway, I want to look at the ways in which maybe I try to take charge of a conversation by being handsy and flirtatious. And, you know, stuff like that can happen. For myself, that has been done to me. So then, you know, you kind of can carry that stuff forward if it's unexamined. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think consent is an ongoing conversation. Just like I think sex is an ongoing conversation. And, you know, if you take your partner's sexual response for granted, well, they always like this, so they're always going to like it, then you've kind of fallen asleep at the wheel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. I'm so curious about some of the sex secrets of escorts. Do you want to share some of those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I wrote the book quite some time ago, and I'm working on my second book now. So I'm more focused. And by the way, the book that I'm working on is really coming out of the work that I'm doing with Safe and Sensual.
What's the book that you're working on now?
It started off titled Love, Lust, and Romance in the Wake of Me Too. But I may retitle it to Safe and Sensual, Pleasure and Consent for Couples in Long-Term Relationships.
Great.
I'm really wanting to focus on, that's my sweet spot right now, is helping couples who have known each other for a long time and are having problems. With usually they think it's just about they've gotten bored with each other, and I like surfacing the issues that are behind that so that their orgasms will naturally rebirth themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of peppered into our conversation so far. What are the things that kind of pop up, you know, when you are working with couples, especially long-term couples? So when you start working with a couple, what are some commonalities that you're seeing that kind of play out?
The some of it's kind of gendered. So, working in our small community, I see more cisgender heteronormative couples than I do couples who have alternative gender identities and might be, in lesbian or gay relationships. So I'm noticing sometimes there can be some pushiness on the cisgender male side to let's try the thing I saw in porn because that looks really hot.
To get rid of like boredom, or just to do it, just to try it?
It varies from individual to individual, but I would say a lot of times it's like I want to do the exciting thing I saw on my smartphone or my laptop.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm kind of laughing because I was listening to a sex educator not too long ago, and this has been the comparison. I've heard it a couple of different ways, but watching porn and expecting your sex to look like that and be like that is like watching Fast and Furious and thinking that that's how we drive. And so it's like, come on, babe, get in the car. Let's fucking,
right.
I don't get kicked off Facebook.
Let's drive on two wheels on the one side of the car.
Yeah, let's just go for it.
Yeah. Well, I've produced and appeared in porn. And I always tried to make it as realistic as possible because I was wanting to surface, real orgasms and real sex.
Yeah.
So, but I want to tell you something. Even with that attention to realism, it's still not going to be able to give you the full exposure to what happened. So let's say when I was on the Playboy channel having sex with my husband, it was real sex, but did they show everything from start to finish? No, they do clips. Here's, we're doing this position and now we're doing that position. So
we jumped to here and his cock was totally hard the whole entire time. Yeah.
And somehow or another, there was a minimal foreplay.
Yeah, like, come on, babe, let's just do it.
It's called editing.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of the action that winds up on the, well, now it's all digital, but in the day there was actual film and it was wound up. So we still have these sayings that come from the old days, like it wound up on the editing floor.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then there's also porn that kind of shows you what might be exciting for a male viewer, but has almost zero sensitivity to what comports to female sexual response. And one of my favorites is ejaculating on a woman's back. I can get off on ejaculate going certain places, like maybe a pearl necklace.
Right.
But I honestly can tell you, I've never had an orgasm. Never really had an orgasm because somebody ejaculated on my back. So why show the guy pulling out when she's just getting so close to an orgasm? Those sort of things become unrealistic, and then it sets up a heterosexual couple to be kind of struggling against what actually works for her body and what her male partner might think should work for her body.
Right.
So that's a real common one. And usually what I do is I ask the couple to read Sherry Winston's Anatomy of Women's Arousal.
Beautiful book.
Great book. I wrote a sex manual and I think it's the best sex manual ever. Yeah, to really become familiar with what a woman's body actually likes. And of course, every woman's different, but there's just certain things that if she's a cisgender female, her anatomy probably looks like that and functions like that to some degree. And not being aware of things like the vestibular bulbs or the clitoral complex or the clitoral cuff that runs around the vaginal barrel how we really should be going for the standard of puffiness instead of wetness.
Yeah.
Because wetness is just a defense against rape. It's not really a sign of full arousal.
Right.
But puffiness, well, now that's another story.
Plumpness. Yeah.
You wait till the vestibular bulbs are engorged and it's all puffy there, and then the vagina's just gonna pull it in.
That's mine now.
Because she's hungry.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So it's like, that would be a typical thing. I'm sorry to say that's not in Sex Secrets of Escorts. Sex Secrets of Escorts is really about helping women initiate sex, about initiating foreplay. So let's go to the other sex. I don't want the cisgender men to feel beat up. So a woman who's in a relationship with a man, somebody who has a penis, I have encountered a lot of them. Like, yeah, foreplay, sure, I gave him a blowjob. And I can't tell you how many men I've talked to who are like, a blowjob is a foreplay.
Really?
No, it's where's the touch? Where's the kissing all over? Where's the seduction? What does that look like? No, it's not that you put on sexy lingerie. Touch me in a way that's sexy. Don't just unzip my pants and fall to your knees.
Right.
Sure, that stuff's hot in certain circumstances, but we're talking about long-term relationships here, and after a while, that can be kind of perfunctory.
Totally.
It's kind of tantamount with the guy who just like, kiss your mouth, nibble on your nipples, go down on you, and stick it in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised, but one thing that I really have been tracking over the years working with cis men is that most of them are really surprised and also delighted or afraid to ask for soft, sensual touch that's not centered around their cock. That's just like, a nice back scratch, up into the hair, like. Yeah. Some of them have never felt that connected to their sensuality, and they come in the studio and that's included, and they're just thinking, I don't know how to ask for this. What if I'm not, I want to be dominant and like doing all these things, and I want my cock to be stroked. And again, like all of that is great, but it's the full range that these men are just really hungry for and really desiring.
Yeah. And I'm going to be reaching out to the cisgender men that came to my women identified safe and sensual class, because I really want to provide something for all genders around being safe and sensual. I think I have had male clients, definitely, especially younger ones who are more in touch with their feelings and give themselves permission to have a full array of emotions, who have felt violated sexually by cisgender females. And that's actually a thing. It's not something we're talking about much in the culture, but just the assumption that an erect penis is consent. And by the way, it's not. Right. It's just not. An erect penis is just an erect penis. And it can also be a reaction to rape.
Mm-hmm. So I also want to mention that, there are clients of mine that have soft cocks, for a variety of reasons, and they get shamed or just like tossed to the side. Oh, you're not ready yet. It's like, yeah.
Oh, the things you can do with a soft cock.
I know, right?
The beautiful orgasms that a soft penis can have.
Yeah, or like just including the entire male frame, and not just isolating him down to whether his cock is hard or not. Like,
no, it's such an objectification of a cis male body.
Yeah.
So it's such an objectification. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that you might have been sharing like a couple of your, secrets that, again, like these came out in 2005.
Yeah.
And maybe there's just some other things that have come to you now over the years. Like, what are some interacting with men, whether it was in a professional setting or now, you have a different focus and a different way of holding the space. But yeah, what would you say are...
Well, one of the things I want to, while we're still talking about what came out of escorting, I branded something called my exquisite partnership formula. And it is a 5-step process for a very, very firm, non-negotiable no. So usually when you're working with couples, you want to help them kind of, navigate the terrain in a way that's looking for what will, make us both happy. And sometimes that conversation goes in the direction, I'll do the thing that you want to do, and then we can do the thing that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that isn't a feasible, workable place, but there isn't a lot of tools for just like, no, this doesn't work for me and I'm not available for it. There's even kind of a codependent assumption that if you're in a long-term committed relationship, you should try to agree to the things that you don't want to do just out of courtesy and generosity.
Right. And
I'm really wanting to shift the narrative around that. And maybe it's because I'm poly and I think if your partner isn't into it, you should find somebody else who is. But I'm not really selling that. I am suggesting, even if you want to be monogamous in a long-term relationship, that there are so many things that you can do sexually that would probably just excite both of you. That you're allowed to have some absolute fear, full no's. It's like, no, non-negotiable. And how do you do that in a way that creates a juicy connection and actually furthers sexual interaction? So I developed this while I was escorting because I had to do that. I had to have very firm boundaries about, no, that touch or that particular sex act is not available. Mm-hmm. And not interrupt or somehow or another trouble the connection that I have with this person. They're feeling vulnerable. To express a sexual desire is a very heightened level of emotional vulnerability. So, that's something that came directly out of escorting. And I feel that it's a tool that I've learned how to help people use it in lots of non-sexual situations even. And it really just comes down to starting off, you want to validate the person, right? Like, oh yeah, totally. Lots of people love doing that. I get why you want to do that. Of course you do. Mm-hmm. And then to appreciate them. And what's really special is that you actually were honest and vulnerable and brought this to me and told me how you feel and what you want. And it just really opens up my heart and makes me feel so close to you. I really appreciate it. And I want to tell you something. That particular thing that you're talking about is something that I had a really negative experience with, and I'm just not ever going to do it again. But something? There's actually something I've really been dying to try with you. I'm wondering if you'd like to know what it is.
I like how you sandwich that in there.
It's a real quick redirect. Mm-hmm. Just onto the thing. And look, they might not, it depends on the power dynamics in the relationship. They might get pouty and go, no, I don't like your idea either. Okay. So then step 5 is basically, you know what? That's cool. I hear you don't want to do what I want to do. I don't want to do what you want to do, but I know we love each other. I am absolutely sure we're going to find something we both really, really want to do. Mm-hmm. How about we get together tomorrow after work? Find out what that is.
Nice. Yeah, it's such a beautiful way to share honestly and have boundaries. And then I imagine it's really useful for both people to understand the process so that they can grow and receive that no without, hopefully the more they do it, the less triggered and reactive they become and going, oh yeah, you're not obligated to say yes to everything.
Well, this shit's road tested. I want to tell you something. It's road tested to the tune of, several hundred people. Several hundred cisgender males from every walk of life you can imagine. educational levels, race, and countries of origin. And I want to tell you that if you get good at delivering this, I've never triggered anybody. The excitement of getting invited into something that you actually want to do is so alluring that for most people, they're just like, okay, never mind. What is it?
Yeah. Or just even like the first step you mentioned of like the validation. Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. You know, I could see how that could be totally hot, and you're understanding they're getting them before you just say the no. It just feels really different.
It totally is. And then very quickly segueing. So it's so much about energy, because if your energy is, I'm never doing that.
Right. Or, ew, why would you want that?
Yeah. Or, you know what? This is not a conversation we're going to have, because that is never going to happen.
That sounds sticky.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Or the other, so I want to tell you something. One of the reasons this is like such a passionate thing for me is that with the advent of Me Too, there was about 2 years ago, before the pandemic, when Me Too was still kind of a thing. And I'm not saying it's gone away, by the way. It's still, it's still there, but we just don't hear about it as much. Right. New York Times ran a headline and had a whole article talking about when saying yes is easier than saying no. And the whole premise of the article was basically like, I didn't want to, I didn't like it, but it just seemed like it was easier to go along with it because it'd be over with soon anyway.
Wow.
And I suppose if that's the way you want to conduct your life and you're never going to see that person again, okay. But if you bring that kind of thinking and that kind of response or reaction into a long-term relationship, you're going to kill your libido.
Yeah.
It will die.
Yeah. Going along with things, even if it's like it sounds as simple as like, well, it's easier just to like eventually. Yeah. That's just
Yeah. So that's why I want every person of every gender to be equipped with a juicy, inviting, exciting, alluring, hard no. Because there's so much to say yes to.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's the art of the deal in a way. Veronica, I really enjoy connecting with you, and we live in the same community right now, and it would be sweet to have tea sometime. But how do people find you?
It's really easy. You can just put Veronica Monet in your search engine, or the Shame-Free Zone in your search engine. I'm all over the place. The website is theshamefreezone.com.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Veronica, thank you so much for what you do in the world. I'm looking forward to when your book comes out. Maybe we'll have you pop on again.
Yeah, and I have a program on my YouTube channel. I should have you over there.
Have me on. Yeah, and also come into the studio, get some sexological body work. I would love to offer you that.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome, Veronica. Thank you again for.
All right, sweetheart. Happy holidays and happy solstice.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, have a good night. And those of you that are watching, we do this most Thursdays. You can check us out on YouTube, BodyJoy Intimacy School. You can also check out our socials. We're on Linktree, but I don't know that URL right now, but you can also Google BodyJoy Intimacy School. We're based in Northern California as well as Austin, but get in touch. All right. Good night, everyone.